A tech mogul escaped to Tokyo with his lover, convinced he'd finally buried his past. But as luxury surrounded him, a quiet force was preparing to strike. When security knocked on his suite and his cards stopped working, he realized his ex-wife hadn't vanished. She was executing her final move. There was something about the way the neon lights bled into the evening haze that made everything feel dreamlike, as if time had slowed down just for them. The clink of crystal glasses echoed in the penthouse of the Aman Tokyo, blending with the faint hum of a jazz pianist playing in the private lounge below. Logan Pierce, tech mogul, investor, and a symbol of Silicon Valley success, reclined in a velvet armchair near the terrace, soaking in the skyline and the moment. His lover, Suki, wearing a silk gown the color of rosé, laughed at something he said, her hand swirling the wine in her glass, one leg crossing over the other to reveal her gold heels. He had done it. Escaped. Not just from endless boardroom strategy sessions and investor expectations, but from Valerie, his ex-wife. The woman who had once built everything beside him, now a closed chapter he no longer wished to reread. Valerie had become a chain, always demanding transparency, always questioning his partnerships, his absences, his emotional drift. So he blocked her on every device, through every channel. She'd realize in time that it was over. For now, his priority was showing Suki the most opulent side of Tokyo. They had arrived earlier that morning via private jet, the kind with plush leather and champagne before takeoff from San Francisco. Now the dazzling metropolis below was their playground. Suki, nearly 20 years younger than Logan, looked at him like he was untouchable. Like the city existed at his will. That was what he loved most, how her admiration made him feel significant again. He poured more wine into her glass and lifted his to meet hers. "To us," he whispered, his tone laced with charisma. She gave him that same sultry, perfectly practiced smile she wore the night they met at a product launch. She had been the marketing lead for a Japanese wellness brand his company had just acquired. It took him less than 48 hours to lure her away to Dubai. 2 weeks later, she was his shadow. At least, that's what she believed. To Logan, women were seasonal luxuries, admired, then replaced. Suki leaned in, her lips grazing his ear. "You're finally free, huh?" she purred. He chuckled under his breath. "Valerie was dragging me down," he said, eyes fixed on the shimmering city below. "Now it's just us and everything else." Back in San Francisco, Valerie sat at a small mahogany desk, wrapped in a silence heavier than grief. Dawn hadn't broken yet, but she'd been awake since 4 a.m. She didn't need to check social media. The lawyer had already sent the photos. Logan never did subtle, not even when leaving his wife. One day he stopped coming home. The next, a separation notice from his attorney landed in her inbox. When she tried to call him, she discovered she was blocked. But Logan had underestimated her. Over the last 10 years, Valerie had absorbed far more than he thought. He believed her too soft-spoken, too domestic to grasp how his business worked. In truth, she had studied his every move, every international wire, every tax loophole, every time he disguised personal expenses as corporate strategy. She never intended to weaponize it. She believed in him. She built a future with him. Dreamed of a family, lake houses, legacy. But when betrayal replaced belief, Valerie transformed. She opened her laptop. A folder labeled Logan International Holdings glared back at her. She had every file. She didn't crave revenge, that wasn't her nature. But she would not be cast aside like a trend gone out of season. Logan thought she would vanish without his last name, his contacts, or his money. He didn't know she had already consulted a white-collar crime attorney and a forensic audit expert. Everything was in motion. An international asset freeze wasn't an idea, it was imminent. All they needed was for Logan to misuse at least $50,000 of corporate funds for personal use. And Tokyo. Tokyo was never cheap. Back in the penthouse, Logan flicked through his company banking app, while Suki showed him a luxury shop on her phone she hoped to visit tomorrow. He wired $10,000 to the hotel, a concierge account to cover their private driver, then another $5,000 wired to Suki's personal account. Logan's company had more than enough liquidity to cover their week-long retreat. The board wouldn't notice. They never did. And even if someone raised a question, he'd just label it client engagement. It lived in a gray zone, but Logan had always thrived in the gray. I want to take you on a hot air balloon ride over Mount Fuji, he said casually, kissing her neck. She giggled and murmured how romantic he was. He smiled, pleased. Valerie never appreciated things like that. She always asked if the expenses were tax-deductible. By early morning, Logan was still asleep, one arm draped across Suki's bare waist, as the city outside slowly stirred to life. But 3 floors below, at the front desk, a tall woman in a sharply cut navy pantsuit handed a thick envelope to the manager. Her badge read, Naomi Takeda, Bank Liaison, Compliance Tokyo. This is urgent, she said in crisp English. Suite 510, immediate delivery. The hotel staff nodded. They were used to high-profile guests receiving confidential packages. What they weren't used to was the red seal on the envelope, a judicial crest. Upstairs, Suki stirred first. She reached for her phone, aimlessly scrolling. A notification popped up on Logan's phone beside her, and curiosity got the better of her. It was an email. Subject line, unauthorized use of corporate funds, response required. Her heart skipped. Another email followed, this one in Japanese, but she could read the important parts. Dongemini, zizumu hua. Her chest tightened. Frozen assets. She slipped out of bed and tiptoed to the bathroom, his inbox wide open as more emails rolled in. 10 minutes later, a knock echoed through the suite. Logan stirred, groaning. Suki rushed out of the bathroom, wide-eyed. There's someone at the door, she said. Logan pulled on his robe, mumbling about early deliveries. He opened the door to 2 hotel security officers and a concierge holding the sealed envelope. The officers spoke calmly, but firmly. Mr. Pierce, we've been instructed to deliver this notice. It concerns an immediate suspension of financial privileges linked to this suite. What? Logan blinked, the fog of sleep clearing like smoke after an explosion. He took the envelope, tearing it open. As he read the words meaning, a cold, crawling feeling started in his gut. Behind him, Suki's voice came quiet but sharp. Logan, what did you do? He looked up, suddenly aware of how quiet the room was. The world, suddenly, too real. The curtain had lifted. Tokyo, once his escape, now felt like a trap. And Valerie, the woman he thought he left behind, had just made her opening move. And it was only the beginning. If you were in her shoes, watching your ex vanish to Tokyo with someone else, what would you have done? Confront him, or stay quiet and strike smarter? Let me know in the comments. And if this story's got you hooked, hit like, subscribe, and remember, your support keeps stories like this going. The next morning, Tokyo looked like something out of a painting. Sunlight spilled through the towering windows of their penthouse, casting warm gold over crisp linens and polished stone floors. Down below, life moved with the effortless precision only Tokyo mastered. Motorbikes buzzing past shrines, couples strolling through cherry-blossomed parks. Inside the suite, though, the atmosphere was shifting. Logan stood shirtless at the window, coffee in one hand, his other drumming faintly on the glass, like he could will the chaos away. The envelope from last night still sat on the desk, its red seal broken like a flare. He hadn't told Suki much, just that it was likely a system error. A glitch. He'd have it cleared by noon, he claimed. She had looked unsure, but nodded, choosing to believe him. That was the advantage of being with someone who wanted the illusion to be real. He gave her just enough to keep her calm, but not enough to truly understand. He spent the morning on calls, pacing in soft linen pants, voice low and clipped. His corporate bank officer hadn't replied, and the overseas account now required biometric access he didn't remember authorizing. Every route back to control was blocked. Still, Logan didn't panic. He'd weathered scandals before. This was just another speed bump. Meanwhile, Suki lounged in a plush chair near the suite's fireplace, wrapped in a silk robe, idly browsing high-end boutiques on her phone. She didn't ask too many questions. Not at first. She knew better than to challenge Logan. It always turned cold quickly when she did. So she played the part. Sweet, agreeable. But inwardly, her suspicion was sharpening. Something didn't feel right. Last night, Logan had looked genuinely shaken. Not performative. And now, despite his posturing, there was tension in his jaw. A tightness in his shoulders that didn't match the easy swagger he liked to wear. Should we still go to Ginza this afternoon? She asked. Watching him closely, Logan turned, forced a smile, and nodded. Of course, he said. And dinner at Fukuda tonight. Nothing's changed. But something had changed. Suki could feel it. She saw it when he tried to pay for breakfast and the card was declined. She saw it when he asked her to cover the bill, just for today. It was the first time he had ever asked her to pay for anything. The same man who once rented an entire bullet train car just to skip Tokyo traffic was now whispering with the concierge about spending limits. She didn't say anything. Not yet. But her thoughts were moving fast. They walked Omotesando that afternoon like a polished couple in a magazine spread. Tourists glanced at them. Him in a sharp tailored suit, her in heels that tapped like punctuation against the pavement. But beneath the luxury, Suki was reading every sign. The way he kept checking his phone, the way his smile stopped short of his eyes, the way he dodged any question about his business with vague phrases like shifting operations and international restructuring. At Mikimoto, she tried on a pair of earrings, simple diamonds, elegant and unmistakably pricey. She adored them. But when Logan told the associate to hold them for later, Suki knew something was wrong. He never waited. Not with her. Not with anything. She excused herself to the restroom and, once inside, locked the door and pulled out his tablet. Something he'd left in her tote earlier that day. What she found wasn't just troubling, it was dangerous. Dozens of unread alerts from financial institutions, red flags, and a long message from his CFO in San Francisco that began with, "We need to address the fund withdrawals." She returned to the store with her face calm, but her thoughts storming. Logan didn't notice. He was too busy performing calm. They left without buying anything, and Suki slipped her arm into his like nothing had changed. That evening at dinner, she ordered wine. He chose water. She asked her questions gently, the kind that didn't sound accusatory but were meant to uncover. "This company card, it's from your business account, right?" He paused only briefly before flashing a smile. "Of course, part of the executive package, perks of the role." Suki nodded, watching him lie like he'd done it all his life, but the mirror was cracking, and she had no intention of being shattered with it. Back in San Francisco, Valerie sat in her attorney's office, her posture steady, her expression unreadable. Across from her sat Yasuko Arai, a legal force, Japanese, sharp, fearless. She'd spent the past 5 years dismantling white-collar crimes across Asia. Now she was working for Valerie. "He's abusing corporate funds," Yasuko said smoothly, pointing to a digital report of wire transfers, luxury hotels, lavish gifts, private cars, none of it approved by any board. "We're ready to move forward. Once the Tokyo courts approve the freeze extension, he'll be locked out of every Japanese-linked account." Valerie nodded, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup. "He won't expect it." Yasuko tilted her head. "You're impressively calm, given what he did." "I've had time," Valerie replied. "Rage fades, clarity doesn't." She looked ahead. "He didn't just betray me. He erased me. This isn't revenge, this is correction." By the time Logan and Suki returned to their suite that night, something had changed in the air. She didn't reach for him. He didn't reach for her. They moved through the space like strangers trying to ignore a landslide. Logan mumbled about lawyers and bank wires and stepped out onto the balcony with his phone. Suki sat at the edge of the bed, staring into the mirror, suddenly unsure of who she was in this whole story. She thought she had won, thought she'd seduced a man of wealth, power, and access. But now she wasn't sure if she was his partner or his liability. And as she picked up the folder he'd tossed aside earlier, the one with the Japanese court seal, she realized the truth wasn't just messy. It was criminal. And she wasn't going down with him. Not in Tokyo. Not anywhere. Not ever. It was nearly midnight in San Francisco when Valerie closed the final folder on her kitchen table. The air was still, interrupted only by the distant hum of an old fridge and the soft whoosh of a passing car below. She lived on the 12th floor of a charming but aging building in Nob Hill, a far cry from the glass-walled home she once shared with Logan. But this space was hers. Every piece in it, from worn paperbacks to mismatched ceramics, had been chosen or kept by her. There was no space for indulgence anymore. Only clarity. Only truth. Only what mattered. A single lamp cast warm light over the documents spread before her. Bank records, tax files, wire logs, and internal memos from the company Logan once swore would define their future. Each page had once passed through her hands, back when she managed the nonprofit arm, before he forced her out with carefully worded kindness and a carefully staged restructuring. He had said it was about public perception. But she understood it was about control. Logan didn't want a woman who could challenge him. He wanted a symbol. Valerie had been too intelligent, too grounded, too unwilling to play along and smile. Her eyes drifted toward a photo on her desk, her and Logan on their wedding day a decade ago. Frozen in time, he looked younger back then. So did she, less guarded, more naive. She didn't hate him. She had tried to, many times, but hate flared fast and left only smoke. What she felt now was colder, clearer. Not revenge, not resentment. It was justice. It was correction. It was finally speaking a language Logan couldn't ignore. Consequence. Her phone buzzed gently on the table. A message from Yasuko. "We're ready. Court submission is tomorrow. You'll be copied." Valerie stared at it for a moment, then locked the screen. She stood, stretched her arms overhead, and stepped to the window. The city glowed below, buzzing and bright. Somewhere across the Pacific, Logan was likely asleep on a mattress worth more than her car. He thought he was invincible, untouchable. Alone at the top, he thought her silence meant she was broken. He didn't realize she'd been preparing. Weeks ago, Valerie walked into Yasuko's office in a navy pantsuit, her hair in a sleek bun. Her face unreadable. It had taken her months to make that appointment, not from hesitation, but from the need to be ready. She had spent the early weeks after the separation drowning in disbelief, reliving every moment, every dinner, every quiet humiliation passed off as affection. Logan had made her feel like background noise in the soundtrack of his success. But now, she had proof. She had files. She had a team. Yasuko welcomed her with a knowing nod. "I've seen your file," she said. "Most women show up angry, devastated, desperate to hit back. You're different." "I don't want revenge," Valerie had said. "I want the truth to count." They started that same day. Yasuko had access to forensic analysts, corporate investigators, legal researchers. They reviewed every email, every transfer, every business dinner that looked more like personal luxury. Logan had been careless, maybe not criminally yet, but enough to trigger corporate violations, especially on overseas spending not authorized by the board. The Tokyo trip? It was a gift. Valerie just had to wait for him to sign his own admission, probably over dessert. Now, back in her small apartment, Valerie allowed herself one breath. She sat in the worn armchair near the window and let the air fill her chest. Tomorrow, Yasuko would file an emergency petition with the Japanese courts to freeze all non-salary assets tied to Logan's companies. The paperwork was procedural, but the consequences were anything but. His cards would stop working, the hotel would be alerted, he'd be marked as high risk by banks, and the most satisfying part? She wouldn't have to lift a finger. The very systems Logan thought were built to protect him would turn on him. She thought of Suki, the mistress. She held no hatred toward her. Suki was a symptom, not the illness. Just another young woman pulled in by wealth, prestige, the perfect lie Logan had crafted. Valerie had been that woman once. She knew how the story started. But what Suki didn't know yet was how it ended. When the music stopped, when the money vanished, when the man she thought loved her turned cold and distant. Yasuko's team had done their job thoroughly. They'd found Suki's name linked to several transactions, wired from Logan's business accounts to her personal debit card, labeled as marketing expenses. Valerie had smiled at the breakdown. $2,000 for a dress, $3,000 for a spa weekend, $6,000 for private language lessons, every yen tracked, every purchase a breadcrumb. It had taken Valerie years to stop doubting herself, to realize she wasn't the problem, that her instincts hadn't failed her. That staying composed in the face of emotional manipulation wasn't weakness. She remembered the nights Logan came home late, drenched in expensive cologne and secrecy, how he brushed off her questions as jealousy or insecurity. She remembered how he made her feel outdated, like something needing an upgrade to remain valuable, but she wasn't orbiting him anymore. She had formed her own gravity. Across the ocean, Logan was still trying to contain the chaos. Endless calls to his CFO, to his attorney, to the hotel's finance office, all met with blank stares and confusion. The systems were rejecting him, his emails were bouncing. But the most disturbing sign of all, a message from the board chair: "We need to talk, immediately." He was sweating now. Suki noticed. But she didn't say anything. Not yet. She was watching him closely, like a predator watching something about to break. Something had shifted, something final. She didn't need to understand the legal jargon, but she knew what power looked like when it slipped. The canceled bookings, the trembling hands, the frantic checking of accounts. Suki had always admired power, but she wasn't loyal to it. If Logan was going down, she had no plans to go with him. Valerie returned to her desk and carefully placed all the paperwork into a sleek black folder. She slipped the folder into her bag, then walked toward the bedroom, turning off the lamp behind her. In the dark, the city lights shimmered across her ceiling like quiet fireworks. She didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel bitter. She felt ready. She had spent years living in the echo of Logan's ambition, helping build a dream that never included her. But now she had her own map. And when the moment arrived, and it was close, he wouldn't even see her coming. Not right away. Not until it was too late. Because the most dangerous person in any story is never the one shouting. It's the one you forget is still in the room. And Valerie was done being forgotten. The afternoon sun in Tokyo poured thick through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the suite, casting warm amber light over the glossy floor. It could have been romantic, if not for the thick silence between Logan and Suki. She sat near the edge of the bed, legs crossed, scrolling through her phone like she was hunting for a way out. Her face gave nothing away. Logan paced near the minibar, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand, eyes flicking from his phone to the folder on the desk, the one stamped with the Japanese court seal. Like an intruder that refused to leave. His world, once airtight and carefully crafted, was beginning to unravel. And with every ignored call, every bounced message, he felt the threads come loose. Suki had said very little since the encounter with hotel security the night before. She had asked questions, light, indirect, but Logan had answered them with charm-coated vagueness. It wasn't enough anymore. She wasn't naive. Her quiet wasn't confusion. It was calculation. He finally turned to her. "What's going through your mind?" Suki looked up slowly, her eyes sharp. "I'm wondering how you're planning to pay for the rest of this trip," she said flatly. "Because unless the Japanese courts take IOUs, we're in trouble." Logan set the drink down harder than necessary. "It's temporary," he said, then quickly softened his tone. "Just a clerical screw-up. Someone in San Francisco flipped the wrong switch. I've got it under control." She arched a brow. "You always say that. I've got it handled." "But I've seen your inbox, Logan. You're not handling anything. You're reacting." He opened his mouth, but the words didn't come. Because she was right. The emails weren't just red flags, they were explosions. His CFO had flagged the charges. The legal team had warned about international violations. The terminology now circling him made his stomach twist. Misappropriation, breach of fiduciary duty, intent to defraud. He tried to pivot. "Don't pretend you were just along for the ride. You've enjoyed the benefits." She laughed, dry and sharp. "You mean the rooms and shopping bags? You were the one moving money around, not me. I never asked you to hide transfers under my name. That's on you." He walked toward the window, gripping the frame. The Tokyo skyline, once a symbol of indulgence, now looked like confinement. "You think Valerie's behind all this?" he asked quietly, more to himself than her. Suki walked to the desk, picked up the legal envelope, and held it out. "This isn't from some basic court. This is international enforcement. You really think this kind of thing just happens?" She stared at him. "Someone built this, Logan. Someone who knew you, who watched and waited." He didn't answer, but he didn't need to. He felt it now. Valerie, of course, she'd had access to everything. She always had. She managed the audits, the philanthropic funds, the internal controls. She knew exactly where to look. He had underestimated her. Again, Suki's voice softened. "You know what scares me most? It's not the charges. It's that you've been playing games with real people's lives, and I don't think you even realize it." She didn't blink. You walk into a room and expect everyone to revolve around you, and when things fall apart, you blame the orbit. Logan said nothing. He wanted to fight back, but all he could feel was weight pressing against his chest, heavier with each passing second. That night, as Logan tried frantically to reach a US-based attorney who could operate in Japan, Suki went for a walk, alone. She wandered through the alleys of Aoyama, her heels ticking softly across stone pathways. From open izakayas came laughter and the sound of clinking cups. She thought about how she'd gotten here, what she'd traded to be beside a man like Logan, the prestige, the money, the illusion of stability. But that illusion had shattered, and what was left beneath it chilled her. He was falling apart, and it wasn't just the finances. It was him. There was a desperation behind his eyes now, the kind that sets in when someone used to being in charge realizes they never really were. Back in San Francisco, Valerie sat with Yasuko one final time before the motion was filed. They sat in a small office overlooking the Bay Bridge, the skyline dimming as twilight moved over the city. Yasuko slid a folder across the desk. "This triggers the freeze across all Asia-linked accounts within 48 hours, she said. "His partners will also be notified immediately. Once it's in, everything changes." Valerie nodded, her voice even. "Do it." Yasuko hesitated. "He's going to retaliate." Valerie met her eyes. "Let him." There was a time when that thought would have left her shaking, when she would have stared at the ceiling at night, second-guessing herself. Not anymore. Now the only question left in her mind was, why did it take her so long? Logan had built a kingdom on silence. Logan had built everything on charm and smoke, and Valerie had once thought staying quiet was noble, that preserving peace was strength. Now she understood. Silence only protects the ones already winning. When she left the office that evening, Valerie didn't go straight home. She walked instead, the cool spring breeze brushing against her skin, her steps measured and sure. Her phone buzzed once. A message from Yasuko. "It's done. The order has been served." Valerie paused and looked up at the skyline, her heart thudding in calm, measured beats. She didn't know what Logan was doing in that exact moment, but she could guess. The confusion, the denial, the first pangs of fear. He'd be calling his banks, barking at assistants, demanding explanations, but the answers were already printed, on court papers, financial reports, transaction logs. Answers that didn't apologize, that didn't blink. Across the Pacific, Logan was doing exactly that, arguing with a hotel manager in Tokyo, his voice climbing with every sentence. Suki stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching the scene unravel with something between disbelief and revelation. She'd admired him once, or maybe just the illusion of him. Now she saw the man behind the tailored suit. A man backed into a corner by his own arrogance. When they finally returned to their suite, Logan slammed the door. "It's a mistake," he said. "I'll take care of it, you'll see." Suki didn't respond. She walked straight to the bathroom. Before shutting the door, she spoke without turning. "You didn't just lose your money, Logan. You lost your credibility. And you're losing me." The door clicked shut. Logan was alone. He looked around the room, once a display of wealth, now a cage. The documents were still on the desk, the whiskey untouched. He collapsed into the chair, pressing his fingers into his temples, thoughts spiraling. Valerie, she had done this, but how? And why now? He didn't know yet. But something terrifying was dawning on him. She hadn't vanished. She'd just gone quiet. And now, she was speaking in a language he couldn't escape. Outside, the Tokyo evening air carried hints of sakura, smoke, and perfume. The city glimmered under the soft glow of lanterns and passing taxis. From the rooftop of the Grand Mitsuki, where staff glided across tiled floors with trays of sushi and champagne, it was easy to pretend the world was flawless. It was exactly the kind of image Logan had imagined when he planned this escape. His suit crisp, his watch gleaming, his practiced smile intact. But inside, pressure was mounting, tight and volatile. The cracks weren't buried anymore. They were in full view. Suki sat across the table in a black silk dress, her hair smooth, her face unreadable. But she wasn't relaxed. Not tonight. Her gaze tracked Logan's every move, searching. She hadn't said much since their last confrontation, only short replies, carefully chosen silence. She was performing, and Logan knew it. So was he. This dinner wasn't a celebration, it was a performance. A last-ditch effort to control the narrative, to convince her and himself that things were still intact. He had reserved a private balcony with live jazz and a vintage wine that cost more than most rent. But when the sommelier asked for a card to confirm the reservation, the illusion snapped. Logan froze. He knew what would happen. Still, he handed over a backup card, an older business line he hadn't used in months. The sommelier returned shortly, polite and apologetic. "I'm sorry, sir. This card was declined. Would you like to try another?" Suki didn't speak, but the silence was deafening. Logan tried again, his personal card. Declined. The waiter's eyes flickered with sympathy before masking it with professionalism. Perhaps Madam would prefer to provide hers? Suki looked at Logan. No gloating, no smirk, just stillness. She reached into her clutch and passed her card across the table. Of course, she said evenly. Let's not delay the chef. The sommelier vanished. Logan leaned in, his voice tight. I'll take care of this. It's just a time zone glitch. Right, Suki replied, because time zones make cards bounce. He said nothing. He had lied. Again. And now the truth was unraveling beneath crystal chandeliers and curious glances from other diners. Suki wasn't naive. She had given him the benefit of the doubt for days. That window had just closed. The meal dragged on. Course after course, flavorless under the weight of silence. Logan barely touched the food. Suki barely sipped her wine. Every silver surface reflected their unraveling back at them. He noticed her staring once, long and focused, like she was trying to read the man he truly was. When their eyes met, she looked away first. But not before he saw it. She was already halfway gone. Later in the elevator, Logan tried to joke. You know, one day this'll be a hell of a story. The week in Tokyo when everything exploded. We'll laugh. Suki didn't turn. You think this is about inconvenience? Her voice was ice. You committed fraud, Logan. You've been lying to me, lying to your board, and dragging me into it like I'm just another asset. He took a step toward her, defensive. That's not what happened. It's more complicated than. But it's not, she cut in. You used company money for personal indulgences. You moved funds through shell accounts and paid for our Tokyo trip with corporate cards. And you left your ex-wife to clean up the mess while you played house with me. The elevator doors opened. Suki stepped out without waiting, her heels ticking sharply against the tile like a ticking clock. Back in the suite, she tossed her purse onto the bed and began packing. Logan followed her, his voice rising with anxiety. Wait, where are you going? I don't know yet, she said, not looking up. Anywhere not funded with laundered corporate money. He reached for her wrist. Suki, come on. Don't do this. We can talk. Just give me some time. She pulled back. Time's up, Logan. You thought you were always the smartest one in the room. But Valerie was always smarter. She let you dig your own grave. And you did. He stood in stunned silence. Suki walked to the desk, picked up the legal documents, and handed them to him. She didn't come after you with emotion. She came with documentation. That's the difference between a woman scorned and a woman prepared. He slumped into the chair, the papers trembling in his hands. They felt heavier now. With every lie, every shortcut, the fraud charges were clearly stated, detailed, damning. The document listed frozen assets, investigations underway, pending board action. At the bottom, Valerie's name, cold, composed. Suki zipped her suitcase. You used me, but I'm not going down with you. He rose suddenly. Suki, I love you. She let out a sharp single laugh. You don't love anyone, Logan. You just collect people, until they stop being useful. She wheeled her suitcase toward the door. Her hand paused on the handle. Then she turned back. You should know something. Valerie didn't just file the court order. She filed it through the same office you used to boast about back when you were mentoring her in finance. Her eyes met his. She played the long game, and she won. Then she left. The door clicked shut, leaving a silence that echoed. Logan stood alone. The Tokyo skyline stretched endlessly beyond the glass. His reflection stared back, empty eyes. Designer suit, a man who built his empire on persuasion and shortcuts, now left with nothing but the echo of his downfall. Far away in San Francisco, Valerie sat quietly with a glass of wine, her phone face down. Her expression unreadable. The documents had landed. The message was clear, and as she gazed out at the skyline they once shared, only one thought crossed her mind. He never saw her coming, and that had always been the plan. It was past midnight when the second knock came. Not urgent, not impatient, but precise, measured, with authority. Logan sat at the edge of the bed, slouched, still in the dress shirt from earlier, now wrinkled, the sleeves rolled up, the top buttons undone, not in control anymore, just undone. Since Suki left, he hadn't turned on the TV, hadn't touched the whiskey. He just sat. The court documents lay open on the nightstand, his CFO's message still glowing on his phone. Emergency board meeting, tomorrow via video. Have legal representation present. The knock came again. He didn't move at first, like standing still might stop what was coming, but he knew better. He rose slowly, smoothing his hair like image still mattered. When he opened the door, 3 figures stood outside. One in a crisp hotel uniform, another in a tailored suit, sharp, silent. And behind them a Japanese official, posture alert, expression calm. "Mr. Logan Pierce?" The man in the suit asked, near perfect English. He held up a badge. "I'm here to deliver an extension of the asset freeze previously issued. This is per authorization from the Tokyo High Court." Logan blinked. "What? That's already been addressed. I got the notice yesterday." The man nodded once. "That was preliminary. This is enforcement. Effective immediately, you are restricted from accessing any accounts tied to the listed entities, including corporate, shared, or secondary accounts. Your current accommodations have been notified. If alternate payment isn't arranged within the hour, you'll be required to vacate." "I don't understand," Logan stammered. "I'm an American. This shouldn't be." "Correct," the man said, voice steady. "But your transactions? Cross borders. Your corporate funds were used within Asia-Pacific jurisdiction. That makes this our concern." The hotel manager stepped forward. "Mr. Pierce, may I speak with you privately?" Logan looked between them, then stepped into the hallway, pulling the door closed behind him, just enough to maintain the illusion of control. The manager lowered his voice. "We deeply regret the situation, sir. But due to the asset freeze and multiple declined transactions today, the hotel cannot continue offering credit. We've already covered an extra night as a courtesy. Without immediate payment, we are required to ask you to make alternate arrangements." Logan swallowed. "I have a card in my bag. A personal account, US-based. It should still be active." The manager nodded politely. "If so, we can try to process it now." Logan moved quickly, almost too quickly, back into the suite. He tore through his leather bag, ignoring cords and documents until he found the sleek black Amex. Not the corporate one. His private card. This one was supposed to be untouched. He handed it over and folded his arms tightly. 30 seconds passed. Then a full minute. The manager's payment device gave a soft beep. "Declined," he said gently. "Would you like to try another?" A heat wave rushed through Logan's chest. He fumbled for his phone and opened the banking app. The account showed. Balance, $0. A red bar flashed at the top. Access restricted. Pending compliance review. His stomach turned. The manager cleared his throat. "Sir, you have 1 hour to resolve this." The officer stepped closer. "Please understand, this is not punitive. You are not under arrest. However, any attempt to bypass or redirect frozen assets will be flagged as a violation." Then they left, leaving Logan standing in the doorway of a suite that no longer belonged to him. He stepped back inside and gently shut the door, like doing so would delay the collapse. At the desk, he dropped into the chair. He didn't even realize his hands were trembling until he struggled to type out an email to his lawyer. His mind was buzzing, half legal jargon, half regret. Memories of Valerie beside him in boardrooms came rushing back. Back when she understood the numbers better than anyone. He'd sidelined her, told her she didn't belong in his world. She was the one dismantling it now. In a daze, he opened a drawer, maybe looking for a pen, or maybe just for order. Instead, he found hotel stationery. He pulled out a sheet and stared at it. Eventually, he scribbled the only words that came to mind. "This isn't over." Then, ashamed of the drama in it, he crumpled the paper and tossed it into the bin. Minutes bled into an hour. No reply from legal. A vague message from his financial advisor. "Stay calm. Wait for US markets to reopen." He let out a bitter laugh. Time zones don't matter when your life is imploding. Then came the knock. Soft, measured, final. Logan opened the door to the same manager, now joined by a concierge. "We've arranged a transfer to one of our sister hotels nearby," the manager said. Smaller, but still comfortable. Logan didn't argue. He just nodded and turned to pack. He folded his clothes in silence. The suits that once made him feel untouchable now looked absurd. Tailored jackets, Italian shoes, monogrammed cologne. He zipped the suitcase and followed the concierge, his footsteps echoing down the hallway like a procession. At the front desk, the manager gave a polite nod. "I hope this matter is resolved soon, sir." Logan didn't respond. Outside, the Tokyo night air was cooler than he remembered. Not cold, just sharp enough to force him to feel it. The city pulsed around him, taxi lights reflecting on damp pavement, distant music from rooftop bars, laughter from people who still had reasons to laugh. His new hotel was tucked into a quiet street near Yushima. The concierge handed him an old-fashioned metal key and wished him good night. The room was plain, a full-size bed, a small wooden desk, a single window that let in a draft. No skyline view, no polished floors. No minibar. He sat on the bed and checked his phone. He tried Suki again, straight to voicemail. Then he opened his email. Unread messages stacked like bricks. Internal reports, external complaints. One from a board member, subject line, "What were you thinking?" He didn't open it. Instead, he turned off the screen and let the device drop beside him. Exhaustion crept in, but sleep wouldn't come. Because he knew? Somewhere across the Pacific, Valerie was still awake. And she wasn't wondering what he was thinking. She already knew. The morning after the asset freeze felt different. Not just colder, but hollow. The hum of Tokyo outside his window had lost its rhythm, stripped of the fantasy he'd wrapped himself in only days ago. He stared at the ceiling, cracked paint stretching like veins, and listened to a horn echo somewhere below. The city didn't care that he was unraveling. It never did. And neither, he realized, did anyone else. Suki hadn't returned a single message. His lawyer had replied at dawn with one word, "reviewed." Nothing else. No apology, no strategy, no miracle. Logan dragged himself out of bed, sheets tangled around his legs like restraints, and shuffled toward the bathroom. His reflection startled him. Hair a mess, skin pale, eyes bloodshot and sunken from sleeplessness. He looked nothing like the man who stepped off a private jet days ago, smug and sure of everything. He splashed cold water on his face and tried to smooth himself out, but the mirror didn't lie. By late morning he dressed in jeans and a wrinkled button-up, the best he could salvage from a now deflated suitcase. The luxury had evaporated. Gone were the Italian suits and cufflinks. What he wore now didn't make him feel human, just exposed. He tried calling Suki again, probably for the 10th time. Voicemail, no message this time. He stepped into the street, the Tokyo air damp and cool, and walked toward the cafe where they'd first had brunch when they arrived. He didn't know if she'd be there. Didn't know if there was anything left to say. But he had to try. Maybe it wasn't about fixing it anymore. Maybe it was about facing it. The cafe was nearly empty, just a few locals nursing lattes and reading the morning news. And there she was. Suki sat at the window, coffee in hand, gaze distant and detached. She didn't look surprised to see him. If anything, she looked ready, as if she'd rehearsed this moment. Logan approached slowly. "Can I sit?" She didn't answer immediately. Then, without looking at him, she motioned to the chair across from her. He sat, cleared his throat. "I know this looks bad," he began quietly, "but I can fix it." She took a sip, still not meeting his eyes. "You can't fix what you won't admit, Logan." "I admit I made mistakes," he said. "But this isn't just on me, Valerie. She did this. She turned the courts against me. She planned it." Suki finally looked up, her expression more tired than angry. "You're still making this about her." "It is about her. She's the one pulling the strings." "She's holding you accountable," Suki replied. "There's a difference." He leaned in, voice sharpening. "You think I'm the only one who's ever blurred the lines for convenience? The board's done worse." "This isn't about them," she said. "It's about you. You didn't blur lines, Logan. You erased them. You created a world where everyone played a part, except you. Valerie supported you. You cast her aside. I stood by you here, and you used me too. You didn't love either of us. You loved the way we made you feel." He leaned back, stunned. There was no anger in her voice. No drama, just truth. And that, more than anything, was what he couldn't stand. "You think I'm a monster," he murmured. "You're not a monster," Suki said. "You're hollow. You don't see it, but Valerie did. That's why she brought all of this down. You underestimated her. You always did." Logan didn't speak. Her words hung in the air like smoke. He stared at the untouched coffee in front of him, slowly going cold. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said finally. "But it did," she replied. "And pretending it didn't won't fix it." They sat in silence as the city moved around them. Scooters buzzing, voices echoing, a dog barking somewhere down the block. Logan searched for something, anything to say. But there was nothing left. No defense, no charm, no mask. Suki stood. "I'm leaving tomorrow. My flight's at noon." He looked up, startled. "Where are you going?" "Home," she said. "Someplace not tangled in your collapse." "Stay," he blurted. "I need." "You don't need me," she said. "You need an audience. Someone to stand beside you so you don't look like you've fallen." She held his gaze. "I won't be that person anymore." Then she walked away. heels striking the tile floor until the door closed softly behind her. Leaving Logan alone with the weight of goodbye, he didn't move for a long time. A waitress came by, cleared the empty cup, asked if he wanted anything. He shook his head. Later, he made his way back to the hotel. His steps slower now, not from fatigue, but from realization. He wasn't just losing status, he was being revealed. And what lay beneath scared even him. That afternoon, another email came from the board. The emergency meeting was scheduled for the next morning. They would vote on whether to suspend him pending investigation. The language was sterile, unemotional. But the meaning was crystal clear. His empire was slipping. He sat in the modest room for hours, staring at nothing, the silence folding in around him. And somewhere in San Francisco, Valerie received an alert. The court documents had been acknowledged. The freeze was officially extended. Her attorney messaged simply, "He's received everything." Valerie didn't pour a drink, didn't share the news. She just looked out over the city skyline, thoughts quiet, certain. She hadn't just caught him, she had built a mirror. And now Logan was finally seeing himself in it. Logan woke to the shrill buzz of his phone vibrating against the nightstand. For a brief second, before reality settled in, he thought it might be Valerie. Somewhere, buried beneath pride and rationalization, there still lived the boyish illusion that the woman he had left behind might still care enough to reach out. But it wasn't her. It was a calendar reminder. A system-generated notification, board meeting in 30 minutes, video conference, mandatory, no exceptions. He dragged himself out of bed, jaw tight, shoulders heavy, eyes raw from a sleepless night. The room was small, the air stale. A single window filtered in gray light, part dawn, part gloom. Outside, Tokyo had shifted. Tourists followed signs. Locals tucked into daily rhythm, wrapped in routine and rhythm. He envied them. Their lives were their own. His, once curated to the finest detail, now lay in ruins. He dressed in what was left. A navy blazer, wrinkled and soft from use, a white shirt, still scented faintly with the cologne of better days. He shaved in the mirror, cutting himself beneath the jaw. It stung, but he welcomed the sting. The hotel Wi-Fi struggled to connect. The video call flickered, then loaded a grid of familiar faces. Board members, legal counsel, the CFO. No smiles, no warmth, only distance. Logan sat straighter, smoothed his voice, summoned what was left of his poise. "Good morning," he said. The chairman Harrington didn't bother to return the greeting. "We'll keep this direct," he began. "You've reviewed the filings. We've seen the transfers. We've consulted legal. The board has grounds to suspend you from all executive operations, effective immediately." Logan opened his mouth, but Harrington raised a hand. "This isn't open for discussion. The damage is measurable. The press is circling. Shareholders are demanding answers." "I can explain," Logan insisted. "This was a misstep. Expense allocations, accounting oversight. Nothing we can't fix." "It's not," said the CFO. "You used company funds for personal travel. Unauthorized disbursements, repeated violations." He paused. "Valerie may have presented the evidence, but the actions were yours." Her name, spoken aloud, hit Logan like a wave of heat. She wasn't in the room, but she didn't need to be. Her silence said everything. "I built this company," Logan said, his voice taut. "When we were months from collapse, I saved it. You all know that. And now you're endangering it," Harrington replied. "Until further notice, you're suspended." The call ended. No goodbye. Just silent squares fading into black. Logan stared at the reflection in his monitor. For a long time he didn't move. His legacy, the thing he once sacrificed everything for, was no longer his. Later, he called Valerie, not to apologize, not to defend. He wasn't sure what he would have said if she answered. But she didn't. He wasn't blocked. He checked, but she didn't pick up. Not after the first ring, not the second. She just didn't come to the phone. And that more than anything wrecked him, because rage at least meant you still mattered. Indifference meant you didn't. He called again that evening. And again the next morning. Still nothing. Each unanswered ring felt louder, each silence deeper. He was used to response, tears, yelling, confrontation. But this was precision. Valerie wasn't retaliating, she was erasing. And in her absence, every room felt louder, every breath heavier. He turned on the television just to drown the quiet. It didn't help. He left the hotel only once, walked past stores he used to parade in, past restaurants now out of reach, past couples laughing over bowls of ramen and wine. He found a bench by the Conda River and sat in silence, watching the water crawl. The city hadn't changed, but he had. Or maybe he hadn't. Maybe he was only just now seeing what had always been true. He was alone. He had confused noise with connection, status with strength, control with love. Back at the hotel, the concierge handed him a letter. No envelope, no stamps, just his name, and Valerie's handwriting. His fingers trembled as he opened it. The note was short, not cold, not cruel, composed, measured, unmistakably her. She hoped he'd find peace in his own silence. That one day, he'd understand what he lost, that she never wanted revenge, only clarity. And the truth, she wrote, had always been quiet, but he never listened. He folded the letter and slid it into his pocket. He didn't cry, he didn't rage, he just sat there, staring at the wall. The noise of the city outside, a world no longer his. The next morning when housekeeping knocked, the room was empty. No note, no suitcase, just a bed, neatly made, and a cup of tea gone cold. Logan wasn't gone, he was just elsewhere, inside himself, unraveled. In the space between who he had been and who he might have become, Logan searched for the version of himself he could live with. A version who had finally learned that silence, when earned, could echo louder than 1,000 apologies. The flight back to San Francisco was nothing like the one that had brought him to Tokyo. No private jet, no champagne, no leather interiors, no Suki resting against his shoulder. Instead, Logan sat by the window of a commercial flight in business class, surrounded by strangers who had no idea they were flying next to a man quietly unraveling. He wore sunglasses the entire flight, not for light, but to hide the swelling beneath his eyes and the weight of everything behind them. His blazer didn't match his slacks. His shoes were scuffed. The man who once prided himself on being the most polished person in any room now looked like someone who had stepped out of a life that no longer fit. The airport buzzed, busy and loud. No one noticed him. He used to get looks, nods, a smile of recognition. Sometimes someone would say they had seen him on a panel, heard him speak, read something he wrote. Now he moved like a shadow through the terminal, dragging a basic suitcase that looked borrowed. He didn't go home. He wasn't ready to see the building, or the staff, or the penthouse suite that now felt like a museum of loss. Instead, he checked into a business hotel a few blocks from his company's office, one he had once used for out-of-town executives and partners, a place that used to treat him like a king. Now it offered him lukewarm greetings and neutral expressions. The board had voted. He was officially suspended, indefinitely. The media had caught the scent. Headlines were circling like sharks. Tech CEO faces investigation over misused company funds. Tokyo trip sparks legal trouble for Bay Area executive. And amid all the noise, Valerie's name began to appear. Not as a bitter ex-wife, but as a whistleblower, a strategist, a woman who used the very playbook Logan had written to beat him at his own game. He scrolled through the online comments at night, even when he knew he shouldn't. People called him arrogant, careless. Some mocked him. Others said it was overdue. But the worst weren't the jokes. The worst were the ones that told the truth, that he'd taken something promising and spoiled it with entitlement, that he'd built something fragile and acted like it was permanent, that the empire was never real. He hadn't heard from Suki since the cafe. She posted one photo the next day, her on a plane, sunglasses on. The caption beneath, "Some flights take you home, others bring you back to yourself." There was no mention of him, no reference to what had happened. Just a clean, graceful exit. She would be fine. She always knew when to walk away, and she had, right on time. At the office, whispers moved through the halls like drafts. People avoided his name. Some emails went unanswered. Others replied with formal coldness. His assistant of 4 years sent one message, "I'm sorry, I didn't know." He stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. There was no apology that could undo this, nothing to unmake what had already happened. In his absence, Valerie had stepped in, not with a title, but with purpose. She had been invited to consult on compliance reviews. Her insights were now being used to rebuild the system he had broken. The same Valerie he once dismissed as too careful for strategy, too emotional for risk, too ordinary for a world like his. And now she was the one fixing what he couldn't. He later learned her letter to the board wasn't accusatory. It was structured, clear, evidence-backed. She didn't attack, she presented, precise, unforgiving, undeniable. and that was more powerful than anything else she could have done. She didn't destroy him. She proved herself. He sat in the hotel bar one night, holding a drink he couldn't even taste, when someone approached. Michael Trent, a former colleague, nervous, always agreeable. "Didn't expect to see you here," Michael said, sliding into the seat next to him. Logan gave a half smile. "Yeah, I didn't expect a lot of things." Michael hesitated, then said, "They're saying Valerie might take a formal advisory role." Logan sipped his drink. "She should." Michael looked surprised. "You really think so?" "She's the only one who saw the fire coming," Logan replied. "The rest of us were too busy lighting matches." There was a pause. "You know," Michael said, "I never really knew her. Outside of company events, I mean. She always seemed quiet." Logan chuckled, no humor in it. "She was quiet because she was watching, listening. She was always 3 steps ahead, even when I acted like she wasn't even on the board." Michael nodded, then stood. "Well, if it means anything, I hope you land on your feet." Logan watched him walk away. He finished his drink and ordered another. But he didn't touch it. Instead, he sat thinking, not about what he had lost, but about what he had wasted. Time, trust, people who once believed in him. A few mornings later, he woke to find a folded piece of paper slid under his hotel door. No envelope, just one sheet. He opened it slowly, immediately recognizing the handwriting. This was never about destroying you. It was about stopping the version of you that forgot what it meant to be human. If you ever remember who that man used to be, maybe you'll understand why I walked away. Maybe you'll even thank me. But don't reach out. I don't want to hear an apology. I just want peace away from your noise. He read it again and again, then folded it neatly and slid it into his coat pocket. Not as a token of shame, but as a reminder. That silence wasn't the absence of sound. Sometimes it was the loudest truth there was. The lobby of the hotel pulsed with subtle rhythm. Soft conversations, the roll of luggage wheels, elevator chimes. Morning light poured through tall glass panels, glowing against polished tile like a spotlight. No one seemed to notice, except for Logan. He stood near the concierge desk, slightly slouched in a suit that once symbolized authority. Now it felt like a borrowed identity. His shoulders sagged with something new. Not just loss, recognition. The clerk called his name quietly, then slid a plain white envelope across the counter. No branding, no stamp, just his name and handwriting he would know anywhere. He didn't move at first. Opening it felt like unlocking something he hadn't prepared for, but what hadn't already been laid bare. He took it to one of the armchairs by the window, sat down, opened it with care. She had been here. Valerie had stood in that very lobby, walked past strangers, handed her note to a uniformed man, and left. No confrontation, no drama, just presence, intentional, unmistakable. He unfolded the letter like something sacred. The paper was thick, clean, her favorite kind. Her handwriting hadn't changed, controlled, elegant. "Logan, by the time you read this, I hope you know this was never about breaking you. It was about stopping you from breaking yourself. I watched you become someone I didn't recognize, someone addicted to applause. Someone so loud with performance, truth had no room to exist." He read each line like it was spoken aloud. "You may think this was revenge. It wasn't. Revenge is messy. This was something else. Closure. For you. For me. For all the years I gave to a man who believed silence meant submission. I wasn't silent because I was weak. I was silent because I was paying attention. And when the time came, I acted." He looked around. No one was watching him. He was just another man with regrets in a city full of them. "You taught me to trust my instincts. I used to think love meant loyalty, no matter the cost. But I've learned something else. Real love can't exist without respect. And the moment you prioritized your ego over your integrity, you stopped respecting me." His hands trembled slightly as he held the paper. He remembered the night he had made that decision, the night he called Suki while Valerie was asleep. The thrill, the validation, the ease with which he justified it all. He told himself Valerie didn't understand him, that she had grown distant, that he deserved more. But now, sitting alone in a lobby that wasn't his, with nothing left to prove and no one left to perform for, the truth hit differently. "I didn't walk away because you failed. I walked away because you refused to see your failure. I gave you the benefit of the doubt, and you used it to build walls instead of bridges. You pushed away the one person who knew you beyond the job titles and the money. And you did it thinking there would always be someone else waiting. Maybe there will be. But they won't see you the way I did, and that will never be their fault. Logan rubbed his thumb over the ink, as if doing so might blunt the sharpness of her words. Around him, the city kept moving. Travelers wheeled bags across the floor. A couple posed for a photo beside the flower arrangement. A child shrieked as her father tried to bribe her with a sweet bun. It was all still happening. Life, relentless and indifferent. This letter is not an invitation. It is not an opening. It is not the start of something new. It's the end. Not because I hate you, I don't. But because I finally love myself enough to know that I deserve more than what you gave. And I believe, somewhere under all the noise, you do too. I hope one day you find your way back to the part of yourself that still believes in something. Not in power, not in reputation, but in truth, in connection. She had signed it simply. Valerie Logan folded the letter slowly, deliberately, then slipped it into the envelope and tucked it inside his coat. He didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, because it did. But tears wouldn't matter now. They wouldn't undo the past, wouldn't change what had already been lost. Valerie wasn't angry anymore. She was resolved, and that, somehow, was more final than rage ever could be. He remained seated for what could have been an hour, maybe more. Outside, the sky lightened, the lobby filled. Eventually, he stood, placed the envelope deeper in his pocket, and walked toward the revolving doors. No one looked up. No one called out. Outside, the wind brushed against his face, and for the first time in weeks he felt something close to clarity. He had spent years building an empire of mirrors, caring more about how things looked than what they truly were. And in the end, it hadn't been stolen. He had let it crumble, piece by piece, convinced that if he smiled brightly enough, no one would see the fractures. But Valerie had seen them. She had always seen everything. And now, as he stepped onto the quiet street of the city he once ruled from behind corner offices and glass towers, he carried nothing but the silence she left behind. A silence that spoke more than any courtroom, more than any press release, more than any apology ever could. Because sometimes the final word isn't shouted, it's written, folded, delivered quietly in a hotel lobby.